Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hammer Museum. Thank you. I'm Claudia Besser. I'm the Director of Public Programs here, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all this evening. We're so thrilled to present the films of Ana Mendieta, organized in conjunction with the exhibition Earthshaker, which is now on view at Vaz Projects in Santa Monica through April 18th. It's always an Ana Mendieta moment, but it feels especially like an Ana Mendieta moment right now, especially with the Del Vaz exhibition here in LA, the Vital Signs exhibition currently on view at MoMA, and the just announced major exhibition retrospective at the Tate Modern, which is going to open in June 2026, all about Ana Mendieta. So very, very exciting time. Tonight's films that we're going to see here, the program features a diverse selection of 10 moving image works created by Mendieta between 1973 and 1981, which she staged in social as well as natural environments across Iowa, Mexico, and Cuba. And in the films, she records her performative actions, her famous Silueta Series, and her cave series called Esculturas Rupestres, or Rupestrian Sculptures. We're going to screen all 10 short films back to back, and please note that the films are all silent. You should have all received a handout with information about each film on the way in. If you didn't get the handout, you can get some more. They're in the theater lobby. Because the films are silent, I now hereby implore you all to take your phones out right now and put them into silent mode, please, or better yet, turn them off. In case you do need to pull out your phone for some reason, please dim the screen settings, because when it's on and you bring it on, every single person behind you and anywhere near you can kind of get blinded in a movie screening. So please turn your display settings low, and that way we'll hope to prevent that. So each of the films are around 2 to 3 minutes long, and the total film program is around 40 minutes. And then after the screening, we'll have a conversation between Jay Ezra Nayssan, founding director and chief curator of Vaz Projects, and Raquel Cecilia Mendieta, filmmaker and administrator of the Estate of the Ana Mendieta collection. And then after the discussion, we'll have a chance to continue the conversation over some light refreshments in the theater lobby. And I want to thank Jay and Raquel, and I also really want to thank all of the Hammer supporters in the audience and all of the artists in the audience who make evenings like this possible. So thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Jay Ezra Nayssan to say a few words about the films.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you to the Hammer for welcoming Raquel and I. My name is Jay Ezra Nayssan. I'm the founding director and chief curator of Vaz Projects. It's a nonprofit arts organization based here in Los Angeles, and we currently have an exhibition right now titled Earthshaker, which places artists Ana Mendieta, Derek Jarman, and P. Staff in dialogue to explore the alchemical fusions of the body and earth across generations, geographies, and gender expressions. Tonight we're going to be seeing 10 films by Ana Mendieta. I should preface this with saying that Ana created over 100 films between 1971 and 1981. So we're going to see just a snippet. We're going to begin with some early works that she created just as she embarks on this new medium. From there, we're going to explore what would become the Silueta works, and we'll also see some gunpowder works, and then finally, the Rupestrian sculpture works. So across those films, there will be different kinds of mediums and materials, also forms and shapes that we'll explore together. And I think that's about it all. Very excited to have you all. I also want to thank Raquel Cecilia Mendieta. What we will be seeing tonight is the filmic works of Ana, but we will also be experiencing Raquel's life work and her contribution to her aunt's legacy. It's a story of 3 decades, which began here in Los Angeles, actually, with the restoration and digitization and archiving of the films. And so I'm thrilled to have these films return to Los Angeles, to share them with you. I'm thrilled to have Raquel here, and it's such an honor. Enjoy, everybody.
Aren't those films just completely revelatory? They're mind-blowing. So now I'm delighted to introduce tonight's speakers, Jay Ezra Nayssan and Raquel Cecilia Mendieta. Jay is the founding director of Vaz Projects, a nonprofit gallery, as well as a place for community, gathering, and exchanges of personal and cultural significance. And Raquel is an independent filmmaker and writer, best known for her recent films on her aunt, the artist Ana Mendieta. Raquel's films have been screened at film festivals, art museums, and galleries worldwide, and she's also the administrator of the Estate of Ana Mendieta collection and has published numerous essays about the artist for art catalogs, most notably the essay on her experience overseeing the digital restoration of Mendieta's moving image works on film and video for the catalog of the exhibition Covered in Time and History, The Films of Ana Mendieta. Raquel received an MFA from UCLA School of Film and Television and is currently working on a feature-length documentary about the life and art of Ana Mendieta. So please join me in welcoming Jay and Raquel to the stage.
All right. Well, you did mention that every time.
I have to breathe now after that
Yeah.
silence.
You did mention that after every time you see those films, there's new things you realize, and it's like the first time each time. And I have to agree with you.
Yes.
It's been 2 years I've been looking at that Vimeo viewing room, and each time is really incredible. I want to, I guess, begin with perhaps if you could tell us how Ana ended up in Iowa, of all places, after
Sure.
Cuba. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can give a little background for those of you who don't know her biography without just going into too much detail. But Ana Mendieta was born in Havana, Cuba in 1948. So she grew up, had a pretty normal childhood, playing on the beach in the summers and going to school in Havana during the school year and having all of her holidays with her family. You know, they had a very big family in Varadero and also in Cardenas, which is where her grandparents lived. And then when the political situation there with Castro coming into power, a lot of families started talking about sending their children away to the United States, which is something that for us sounds really odd, but in Cuba, this is something that had been done before. During the other revolutions, like her father actually had spent time in Miami studying, and so this was just like a normal thing. Like during tumultuous times, you would send the children away, and then after it was over, the children would come back. So there was a program called the Pedro Pan operation, which was organized through the Catholic Church. And many families were sending the children away to go and be with the Catholic Charities in the United States. And so they decided to do this to Ana and her sister, Raquel, my mother. And so Ana was 12, on the verge of 13, and they were sent to Miami. So they were in Miami a brief period of time until everyone was like kind of sent out to different places of wherever would take these kids. It was a very random kind of like oh, your name is out of a hat and you're going to go here, you're going to go there. And they were sent to Dubuque, Iowa. And they didn't speak English. So they had no idea what Iowa even was. They didn't know how to pronounce it, Iowa. Then, they were, okay. But to them, it was like this adventure because in their minds, they were going to be, going back home. So they were sent to Iowa and had to quickly adjust and learn English and, kind of make their way. They were actually sent to an orphanage, which was kind of like it was like a reform school. It wasn't even really an orphanage. It was like bad kids, who had done crazy things were there. And so they were put from like this kind of prominent family in Cuba to like this very different world. And they had to, fight for themselves and kind of learn English. And, and Ana was always very rambunctious and like scrappy. So like for her, it was, it was very hard, but it was also like she knew how to fight. But it was, it was really hard, and they ended up not going back. And so they kind of moved around from orphanages and foster homes until she found like a better situation in a nice foster family, and then got to have a little bit of that American high school experience, and decided she wanted to study art. And her sister was already had graduated high school and was going to study painting at a small university, a college actually. And so then Anna decided she too was going to study painting. So then she started at a small college, and then after that went and transferred to University of Iowa. So she was in the painting department, and she actually got her undergraduate degree in painting, and then started her master's in painting. And it was kind of like a time when people were just doing very different kind of work than what she was doing. I mean, she was, I don't even know how to explain the kind of painting she was doing, but the professors like didn't really understand it, and they weren't supportive of her. And also, it's like, imagine like this she was very small, like she was like 4'11". She was like very tan skinned and like very like loud mouthed, and would just say whatever. Like if she didn't like something, she would just like whatever. And she just was, and the professors were like, "What is this? Like, you don't really need to get a degree in painting to paint like this." Like they weren't very encouraging. And it was at the same time that the intermedia program was beginning, and they were doing a lot of performance, and she was starting to get involved with doing these performances. Different artists were coming in, and it was really exciting, and happenings were, were in the 70s, all these kind of exciting things were happening. And so she took a class in intermedia, and where they were using the body, and she suddenly felt, oh, this is what I should be doing, because it was kind of alive. And she talked about it later, and talked about the magic, and how she realized that she was searching for something in the work, and it was like this magic, this energy, and that she wasn't being able to express it through painting, and she really felt it when she started working with the body. So, and like the rest is kind of history for Anna. It's like she, started working with her body, and doing like what she called performative work. She didn't consider herself a performance artist. I mean, as she moved on and was like doing things in nature, I mean, she didn't consider herself a photographer. She didn't consider herself a filmmaker, which is really funny to me, because as a filmmaker, I look at these and I'm like, how are you not a filmmaker, But she, if anything, she called herself a sculptor, because she felt like she was using her body as material, like kind of like as like a living sculpture, and also sculpting with the earth,
Yeah.
So.
For those early works that we saw, Door Piece, Moffat Building Piece, and Body Tracks, which I feel like kind of stand apart compared to the other films we saw. I wonder if maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what she was exploring with those works, and possibly how that grew out of her experience being a young woman in Iowa, a Cuban woman in Iowa after 7 years entering into university, and what those works were about, or what they were dealing with, because it feels like they stand kind of, in quite different to what she would later on explore, breaking into nature, which I think is really about kind of returning to a specific location. But I think if I'd be interested to
Door
hear
Piece and
Moffat Building and Body Tracks.
And Body Tracks. I mean, I think actually the answer is a little bit opposite of what you might be thinking. So Door Piece is really, it's kind of like in dialogue with Duchamp. And I mean, for Anna, the thing that's interesting is that she's really known for being, this artist who was in exile from her homeland, and like kind of reconnecting with the earth, and searching for a place to call home, and like that universal theme of like, where do we belong? But the early works don't really speak to that.
Right.
It's like the early
Right.
works, like she really was American, like she grew up in America. Like if you're 12 years old and, and you kind of come here, it's like you integrate, and you're, she had all those experiences of going to the sock hop, and, like just doing all those things that teenagers did back then. And then going to college in the, in the late 60s, early 70s, and she was surrounded by all these people doing all these kind of performative things. And she was right there with them, So Door Piece is like really just like exploring that, that idea of, what the heck, I'm just gonna lick a door. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and same with, I mean, Moffat Building. It's like Moffat Building was, I mean, Anna was very into theatrics. Like she was just like very like provocative, and she wanted reactions in those early works. You know, she did a lot of series of works that were kind of like that, where she wanted to. It was like a question, like if I do this, what will happen? Like, will anybody react? How will they react? So like specifically with Moffat Building, she was hoping that somebody was gonna call the police. Like that was her,
Right.
like that was her dream. Like she wanted to like do this thing, and that somebody was gonna freak out, call the police, and then there was gonna be like this kind of after effect of, you know, that. But no, it did happen, you know.
Right.
So it's like
Right.
people just walk by, like the one lady with the umbrella,
Right.
you know, was the most brave one. But yeah,
But I
it's
guess did she feel like any? I guess was she wanting to see that reaction or expecting that reaction from the American public about walking over
just, I mean,
a
I
puddle
think
of
from,
blood?
I mean, if you think about the time period, it's like, you know, the young people like in colleges were kind of questioning like we are today, you know, like questioning like authority, and you know, it's like, do we follow the rules, or what are the rules, and what happens when we break the rules? I think it's kind of a lot having to do with that. I mean, you know, about the famous piece that she did on the rape series. So it's kind of like all connected to this idea of, you know, things that are happening and what are we doing about them. So it's like that was one of those pieces. And Moffat Building is, you know, it's a fascinating piece really, because it's, you know, there's like disgusting guts on the ground, and like nobody is doing anything,
Yeah.
you know.
I think it's interesting to think about indifference then and today.
Right. I mean, not much has changed,
Not much
like,
has
which
changed.
is really
Right.
sad,
Totally.
you know. So I mean, if she were
Totally.
here now, I mean, it's
Because
yeah.
the work was kind of also inspired by a current event that had happened, correct? In terms of like a college.
Well, that one came after, but I mean, she was doing a lot, so
A college
probably it
woman.
was like it kind of grew from that first thing that had happened, you know. So it's like there was a rape that had happened. It was a murder, and on campus, and she was really scared. You know, it was like, you know, it's like suddenly you're in this like safe environment in this college, very small town in the middle of the country, and this happens, and it's all over the newspapers, and suddenly she's like, oh my God, like this could happen to me, you know, and this is not cool. So she just, you know, she did a series of works about that, you know, saying like, look at this is not normal. Like, what are we going to do about this? How do we stop this? But for her, it was really about confronting that fear. Like she did a lot of these pieces kind of like trying to face it, feeling that if she did it, that she would overcome it.
Right.
Which, you know, I feel like she did, because then she stopped and completely changed the
Right,
work. There's
right.
like a point where she just like, okay, I'm done with that.
Right. Totally.
Like,
Before we get there, though, I'm curious also what you think or why she ended up using film for these early performative works, because, as we'll touch upon later, the film and the photographs are really only a means of recording the actual work. But I wonder what it is about, what was it about film at that time that kind of drew Anna to the medium from painting?
yeah. I mean, a lot of artists who were doing performative types works or works with process were using photography and film or video to document, but not to the extent that she did, which is why I think it's interesting that she didn't consider herself a filmmaker, because I
Right.
think she did
Right.
have like this love affair with film, with the medium, because I mean, it does, to go back to that idea of magic. I mean, film is, I mean, we all know it's like, it's magical. Like when you see it, it comes to life, and it's,
Absolutely.
you know, it's like, even, I mean, to me, it's amazing. These are Super 8 films. I mean, I don't know how many of you know what Super 8 is, but it's like this tiny. I mean, literally this tiny. And it's like, look at how it holds up, you know, on this big screen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for her, it's like they weren't projecting that big, but still, it's like you know, you film something, and then you can watch it, and it's like it comes to life, and it's very magical. So I think that she, you know, really was drawn to that. She did play with video a little bit, but not as she always went back to the film.
Right.
I mean, even with the Rupestrian, like she could have, you know, because by 1981 there was, yeah, but I mean, it's like all her things that had a process. You know, it's like you needed to record it somehow to document it.
So I guess after Body Tracks, she kind of like leaves the studio. I think there's a few other studio works, but she kind of embarks into this journey into nature, where we see the development of the Silueta. And I think that it's really fascinating, essentially, to see from 1973 to 1981, let's say, the development of this motif and this form. And I think it's super interesting for this audience to see kind of it compacted, right? And to see this evolution kind of rapidly. At first, she's in the work herself and is kind of using her own body as a medium. And then she removes herself from the works. And
there was different reasons for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's what
mean,
what was that reason? Or what were those reasons?
Coming outside of the studio was really, because a lot of those early works in the studio was when she was at the university. And so she realized that, she wanted to be doing things kind of on her own terms. It's like if you're doing something in like a studio, it's like there'd be people around, and she didn't like that. Like she didn't consider them performances. She liked it to be private. So it's like was like kind of like taking control of it, like saying, no, you cannot. Like even people who knew her and like would be around, like they would, they testified like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, go away. You can come back when I'm done.
Well, there's definitely a ritualistic nature to the works, right?
Exactly.
So
like it was because it was like a meditation. It was very, and it is like one of the ones I'm trying to think which one it was. They just feel so long, like because you're in silence and watching them. Like, God, this is so long. But it's not. It's like 3 minutes, right? Like 3 minutes never felt longer. But it's for Ana. Like she was very small but very loud, and she was like constantly talking and like moving her hands and like just very active. So whenever I see her in these films or just even see her filming the works, I realized like, wow, it really took a lot of like meditation for her to like, it just is a centerness of like being present and calm and quiet. And it's just so different from how she was, normally. It's like as soon as like she was like, on film, it was like, I'm Ana Mendieta, the artist. And this is who I am. But that's not how she was in, everyday life. She was talking like this.
But I guess do you think that there were any connotations that maybe, or like, assumptions that were made about her work because she used her own body or because...
Yes, because she was a woman
right.
and she was naked. So, she felt like she was being objectified. And she talked about that. And it's like, it just made sense to take herself out of the work. But also because being out of the work, she could now do it by herself. She didn't need anybody. Like there are some that she actually set up the camera and like, but that's, you know what I mean? You don't really know if it's filming and it's gonna, or she had to ask someone. And that's always, any of you who are filmmakers or who do things with people, it's quite annoying sometimes when you're trying to do something like nobody wants to help you or, you're trying to figure it out. So it's like if you're just going to rely on yourself, you're just, okay, I don't need anybody. I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
So and then it's like the work really takes off because
totally.
It's like as soon as she's out, she's like, oh, I can do anything now.
And then the form, I guess, when she removes herself, the form kind of follows the shape of her own body, which is obviously a female body.
In the beginning, she had someone trace her. So she still needed somebody
to
trace her,
Yeah.
But then she actually had a cutout. She made a cutout
wow.
of her silhouette. And she had it was like a piece, like a thin piece of like plywood. And she'd just like strap it to the top of her car and like drive off into the woods or whatever, with this thing. And then it's kind of like because she used it so much, she just knew how to make that shape.
Right.
It was like easy, like, oh, now you've got that, it's your size. I mean, it was always around her size. She called it human scale, but it was, it's funny because when I first started on the human scale, I was like, wait, human scale, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
But it was her size, like about, just under 5 feet. So.
Well, it's like, but then the form, even though it was that stencil, I guess, they start to get really kind of chrysalis-like and amoebic and protean and really actually kind of genderless, essentially.
Right. Well, first what happened was, she had the arms up like this.
Right.
Right. And she talks about how specifically she did that because the idea was that she was going back into nature. So it's kind of like when you go back, you put your arms up and you fall back down into nature.
So that's kind of the shape that the body would take being transported.
Right. But what was happening during that time period was that all these other artists were doing like these goddess type figures, and
Yeah,
so her
feminist
work, right? And she
feminist
was like, no, that's not. I don't want to be in that box, because she did not like boxes and labels, and she just wanted her work to kind of go beyond that and just have like more meanings than just this one thing. So what she said is, I chopped off the arms. That's basically, how she described it. So then it's like, once she got rid of the arms, they kind of became these like kind of mummy type things.
Yeah.
And then they changed, because then it's like, okay, we're done with that kind of mummy type figure. So now let's open it up. And she was very influenced by all different types of art, and specifically like just she would travel, and like read books, and she was very studied and looking at ancient arts and just different types of, Neolithic and just everything. Just and you can see the influences of
Yeah.
things, from the spirals and the different shapes.
I think also what we saw in those few Silueta films is not only the evolution of the form, but also the evolution of the material. So I guess, first of all, her body as a material being removed. And then there's the introduction of natural materials like flowers or water. What else did we see? We saw feathers, right? Well, I mean,
The transformation,
right,
right? She
right.
had a
The
whole
ocean,
obsession with feathers for a little while, trying to turn into a bird, and
yeah, it's
she did a
incredible.
dog.
Right,
She did,
right.
there's a butterfly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the introduction also of like non-natural kind of alchemical magical material like fireworks and gunpowder that she composed herself. Actually, we were talking about how I found in one of the publications inscriptions of the chemical
Right, she made her own
formations.
gunpowder, and then she experimented with that, of how to make it burn slower, or how to make it, turn black, or if she wanted it to be white. So she would have the different colors of the gunpowder, and so then she knew that like if she wanted to burn slower, she would add sugar to it. So she did all. I mean, the first time she used fire was scary because, and there actually is, it's filmed and also photographed. But it's called 3-ring Silueta, and I don't know if she just like dumped gas on it or whatever, but that thing took off. It was like the whole field was like burning until it just stopped. It was like, oh my God. So that's when she started talking to people like, hey, I want to do this. How do I do this like the proper way? And so, her brother was a Boy Scout, and so he had learned how to make gunpowder. So he like kind of gave her that first lesson and like, oh, try this. And she experimented with that. And then there was a professor, Julia Schmidt, who also was using to fire and things like that. And so between all these different resources, she made up her own.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the stand-in for blood as well.
Yeah, she quickly changed from using blood. I mean, the first works, like the one that we saw that was in Mexico, was animal blood. And that's technically like her first Silueta, really.
Right.
I mean, it's funny that she called Imagen de Agul her first Silueta, which is the one with her body with the flowers.
Sprouting.
Yeah. But that one is also like, because it's actually a Silueta made out of blood in this ancient site, that they snuck in and went in there and did this.
Yeah.
But yeah, she started using paint because blood is like sticky and turns brown, and it's not like, she needed to paint with it. So even though it looks blood-like, it's, it's paint.
Yeah. So I guess when we're thinking about kind of the core thematic values to Ana's work, I think obviously I've written down investigating her exile, displacement, and a return to the landscape. I guess I'm curious about why those materials were used or introduced. And as she's, you mentioned being in Oaxaca and stumbling upon this labyrinth, this ancient palace that's been turned into ruins, and finding a silhouette of blood there. What do you make of all of that? What was she making of all of that? Coming off of this experience, going to Oaxaca, which perhaps she was coming across some kind of like religious confluence that was similar to Cuba.
Yeah, I mean, going to Mexico, I mean, she did speak about that, how it was like going to the source. Like she felt like there was magic there, and you can really see her work shift after the first time that she was in Mexico doing work there, because she did actually travel to Mexico the year prior to doing works for a class for an archaeological dig, and then she went back and actually created works there. And like once she actually like had her hands in that dirt, It's kind of like something just took off in her that she connected with it. Of like, this is what I need to be doing. And you can just see the work really change in another direction from that. Imagine like, you're surrounded by people who speak Spanish again, and you hadn't had that. You're seeing the ocean for the first time, and
Wow.
how long, and just, all these experiences. And it's just kind of like the body memory.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
watching Ocean Bird wash up, I was
Right.
like, wow, that's like, how many times was she as a child just like in that ocean, just rolling around and, having fun. And here she is with the bird feathers,
Right.
but just like
Right.
in the water, so it's, sometimes like as an artist, you don't think in your logical in the forefront of your brain of like what you're doing. It's more instinctive, and it's body memory, and it's intuition. It's it's just coming from this other place, and it's very that's I think why Anna's work speaks to so many, because it is coming from that place. It's not something that's just like, oh, I'm going to do this because this is related to that. After she would talk about it, like she would, she did say like, I make a work and then I come back to it and years later and I go, oh, that's what I was doing. And that's, and she also talked about how, when you're doing something and you're aware of it and you're overthinking it, it's like, it's not gonna be good. So she was aware of that too.
Yeah.
It's like,
I
you can't
remember
overthink.
listening to you makes me remember this one thing I read, that she was she was being interviewed by somebody, and that person was like, "Oh, going to Oaxaca must have felt like you're back in Cuba." And she's like, "No, absolutely not. Actually, the landscape in Oaxaca is
Right, it's
so
very
much more
different.
similar to Iowa than it
Right.
is to Cuba, and it's not this lush environment. It's just really dry and really expansive, and you feel completely in nature and consumed with nature."
Right.
And I just thought that was so remarkable to think about this kind of universality of place, because she's coming from Cuba. And I think today a lot of us are looking to our heritage. I'm the son of Iranian Jewish refugees, and thinking about ways of engaging with a culture that I'm completely separated from. I've never been to Iran. I'll probably never go to Iran, but so much of my life is defined by it.
Right.
And for me, what's really incredible about Anna's work is that she's not really engaging in anything Cuban or Hispanic or Latin for that matter. It's totally universal. It's totally, it's in place, it's in earth, and it's everywhere at one time. And it's also beyond gender and sex, right?
Right.
This universal form appears, right? And I think that's what's really incredible and powerful about her work, and that many people don't really notice or learn about until really diving deep into the work, because so much of the writing has been done from a
Right.
very specific
Exactly. Right. Just like
feminist
one
perspective, let's say.
one thing.
Right.
Versus, even Iowa, like the past couple summers I've gone back to Iowa, and we actually went to Old Man's Creek. And that place is so magical. It's like you feel it there, like in the earth
Right.
and in the water, and just like everything around you. And you just, because some people are like, Iowa, like, why would you
Right.
be inspired by Iowa? But
it's
it's
also
inspiring.
yeah. I mean, looking at a lot of the films and the works that we have at Vaz Projects right now, they're all in these really strange, queer landscapes, kind of bogs and marshes and swamps and decomposing forests, and not at all the kind of lush and vibrant environment you would imagine a woman working in the 70s would be
That's fun.
attracted to. Right?
She actually
She
talked about
loved
this in a
that.
funny way. I've worked with real dirt.
Yeah. And I guess, thinking about right now, we've been talking about form and material, and how she rapidly evolved the Silueta form for these ritual practices. And I think we touched upon this a little bit earlier, but I think it's really important, because we're watching the films now, and so many people are probably familiar with her filmic work and photography work, but that for her, they were a means of recording the work,
It's a way to show people the work, and
the
she
ritual.
did show these films, like whenever she could. And then she was showing things in New York at different gallery spaces.
Right.
Not just in Iowa, but also, when she moved to New York, before she even came to New York, she was showing things. So
Yeah, it's
she knew that was a way that people were doing that. It was accepted in the art world at the time. It wasn't like a rare thing in that sense. She just did a lot of it,
so um I guess we end, she's traveling between Iowa and Oaxaca, and we end in Cuba in 1981. And it, I think, also stands apart from all of her filmic work because it's reels, I guess, taped together. It's the
Yeah,
longest.
she edited this piece. So this
Okay.
is like a very unique work.
And it's in
because
black and white.
well, she shifted to black and white in 1980 because she got a medium format Mamiya camera, and she could shoot larger negatives, and she was printing things much bigger. And then she was like going to black and white because she felt it was more sculptural, and it's like the color kind of like is so beautiful. It's like you would never know that some of those caves are pink, that limestone, But imagine like you're looking at those and they're pink. You know what I mean? It's like it has a different meaning.
Yeah.
They're black and white. It's like, oh, this is like serious art, that we're looking at. But also, it's like ancient art. Like you don't know, did someone make these? Have they been here
Right.
forever? Like who made them? What year? But so that specific film though is very unique because she shot three reels of Super 8. Each one is like 3 minutes, and then she edited them herself. So she chose like which shot was going to come first, second, next, and it's like a little story. It's like here we have the like establishing shot, and then she pans, and then she
Right.
zooms in and fades out, and she's like using everything you can use as a filmmaker and like creating an actual story, of like these works that she made in the landscape there. And she showed that in New York at the AIR Gallery.
So, it's like, how the hell did she end up in Iowa? But then how the hell did she end up back in Cuba in 1980?
Yeah, so she moved to New York in 1978. She left Iowa. She had been after she got her graduate degree, she was teaching in elementary schools and junior high, and she had a decent job. But she was like, time to become like a real artist. You got to go to New York. She'd already met so many people. Lucy Lepard had already written about her several times, and she had some shows in New York, a couple different galleries. So she felt confident that she had a good shot. So she moved to New York, and she met a lot of people, and she was really good at networking and finding her way there. Became a member of the AIR Gallery, which was a women's co-op gallery. And so she had her first show there in New York at the AIR Gallery. And then she soon met like a bunch of Cubans who had, were all in New York.
In exile.
And so it was like, boom, right away. It was like, and then like the Miami scene. So she was kind of like doing the New York, Miami thing and kind of getting more in touch with that Cuban side of her. I mean, she'd already been looking into that, but it was like, now it was like, oh, there's more people like me and they're in the art scene, and what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing this, and sharing stories. And she became involved with the group that was actually planning to go back to Cuba. And they were talking about how to bring like artists and intellectuals and different things where they could have like a dialogue with the exiles bringing things back to the island. And so she went back for the first time in 1980. And saw her family, and she kind of went on one of these trips where you went and you visit people and you have these exchanges, and saw her family, and that was it. She was like, oh my God, I have to like keep coming back here, and so but I have to do work here. So she came back in 1981 in January, and she did like a work in Varadero near where her family's home was on the beach, without permission. She just kind of went there and like painted on these rocks, and but she did film it and photograph it and everything, and then started talking to everybody there. How can I get permission to do something? Like, I want to do like a major project here, and proposed it, and she met all the right people, made it happen, and so she was able to go back. She got a grant. I think that was when she got the NEA, or was it the Guggenheim? I'm not sure. It may have been the Guggenheim. So she had the money, she had the camera, and she had the time. So she went back in the summer, which is like the hottest time to be in Cuba. And she had found this location in Jaruco, which at the time was like, it was a park, it was like a place where families went and picnicked, and people went on the weekends. And I mean, people don't recognize that now, because now we know it as like this jungle, because it's all overgrown and nobody goes there, and it's kind of like an abandoned.
Lack of public infrastructure to maintain.
Right, yeah. And it's, there was a hotel there. She stayed at this little hotel, and then walked down and did the work. She was there for a month, and she created all those sculptures. Yeah.
They're carved into limestone, right?
Yes.
Soft and hard limestone.
Yeah, so some are hard, and she kind of used the existing shapes to kind of paint on them and whatever. And then the other ones are all soft limestone that she carved.
So I guess thinking about how the work goes back into the earth, what we were talking about earlier, that the photographs and the films are just a means of recording that ritual or that work, and that it's eventually swallowed back into the earth. I guess the idea of like ephemerality and permanence and impermanence comes into question here. And I'm thinking about, well, they're not completely ephemeral, but it's also soft limestone. So maybe what was she thinking? How these works would evolve over time, because all of the other works would essentially disappear after a day or two.
Like she knew that they were all ephemeral and that they would, I mean, she would come back to a piece, like let's say in Iowa, she did something at Old Man's Creek with the mud, and she would go back and visit it and sometimes even photograph it again as the water rose or different things kind of happened to the work. When the mud would start cracking and like kind of leave all those cracks, and she loved that, and so then she'd come back and photograph it when it was like that. So, but it would still eventually disappear, right? So once she moved to New York, she was starting to think about how else she could do works outside, because, you know, she didn't have Old Man's Creek, you know, she didn't have all those places where she could just go and do work. She had to figure it out more. She would like rent a car, go up to Bear Mountain, or she would go to Cape Cod or do things like that. Or, you know, she had to get permission to do different types of things. So she was doing work in her apartment. She was doing drawings. She was starting to work on objects, you know, and thinking about this transition into creating objects, but still using organic materials, like painting on a mate paper. She was drawing on leaves. So she was, you know, creating sculptures out of like mud and sand, you know, things like this. So she was also doing like site-specific things. Mm-hmm. So that was really the transition, was coming to New York, and other artists that she was meeting were doing like these kind of outdoor installations. And she's like, oh yeah, I could do that too. So she started doing proposals where you would go to a college or something and work with students and then create this thing. But they were all ephemeral. Mm-hmm. You know, they would be there for a little while and then kind of get absorbed into nature. So with the Cuba piece, it's like everyone assumes that that those were going to erode and that she knew that and was fine with that. But she actually talked about it, saying that they were in a park and that people could go and see the work. So in her mind, it was like, yeah, eventually they would erode and, like, you know, kind of the weather, they would become weathered, but people would be able to see that process. They would still be there. But, you know, not knowing that the country would just kind of deteriorate and the park would close and then everything would be grown over and they would just be kind of forgotten in this kind of jungle-like park. So.
And then you went.
And then I went.
In 2018.
Yes.
And
yeah.
What did you see?
Well, I first went because people had been, you know, and they were like, oh, some of these still exist. And, you know, so
so you had heard about.
I had heard about like some of them that were still there, and they're really hard to find.
Wow.
And I'd been to Cuba a few times before, but never had the time, because it's a mission to get there. You know, it's like you got to have a car and somebody who knows how to get there and go to Jaruco and everything. So I finally convinced my cousin, one of my cousins there, like, dude, we're going to Jaruco. And he was so scared because he's like this Havana guy, you know, and I'm like, it's going to be fine. You know, we have crackers. So we finally found it. It was just like, you know, it was a whole thing, really. Like, there's no signs, you know. And we lucked out because there was a guy at some random cafe who knew where they were, and he led us there.
Wow.
So we saw them, and it was amazing. It was just like, oh my God, like, here they are. We found it, we did it. And he was like, yay, we're done, let's go. And, you know, and so I was like, you know, of course, being a filmmaker, I always have like some kind of camera with me, and I was just like shooting stuff and taking photographs. And, you know, I saw this kind of vista. And this was the same time that I was working on the documentary, and also we were working
on Ana or on the caves?
On Ana.
Okay.
And I was also working on the restoration of the films.
Okay.
So like this was the time, like the digital restoration of the films was like almost 2-year process, where it was like going back to all the Super 8s and like making sure we had everything cataloged, figured out this, because it would be like, half a reel over here goes with this half a reel over there, and this piece goes with this piece, and this one actually has 2.5, and so it was like a whole puzzle thing of. And then we had to find the lab, and then work with the lab, and they had to, you know, transfer everything, and then sit through all the hours of color timing, and so it's like hours and hours of watching like the same things over and over. So when I saw something, a vista, I was like, that looks really familiar. Like I was just like, I don't know, I was like, I think we should try and go in there because there might be something that just looks like there might be.
Wow.
And he was like, no way, like we're not, no way, we're leaving, let's go. So I was like, oh, it's fine, because I had my daughter with me and she didn't have the right shoes on anyway, so she didn't get to even come. So she was really bummed out. I'm like, okay, it's fine, we'll go back. So we went back home, and I looked at the films again and everything, and I was like, oh my God, I think that really is the second site. Because we knew that she did work in 2 different sites. There's the one with the hard limestone and one with the soft limestone. And it had been written that the second site was destroyed. So, all these different artists, all these different people had been interviewed. And I said, well, but the clue for me was that, being the detective, was that they said that it was far away from the other site. So there was 2 sites, but one was far away. And I was like, they were not far away. They were like right across, like they were right there. So I was like, something's not right here. I gotta, so it took me like 2 years to get back there. And so we brought a camera and was like, well, we're gonna just shoot this and just see what happens. And that was another crazy story. And then I ended up making like a short film about it because it was very magical.
That's Whispering Caves.
Yeah.
So yeah, that work, that filmic work, Esculturas Rupestres, also was shown at AIR Gallery upon her return, right?
So she knew when she was making those works that she was going to come home and have a show.
Right.
So it's like she got the permission, found the location, made all the works, came home, printed all the, these photographs are large. These are like, really big black and white photographs, and then edited the film all for an opening in November.
Right. And then 3 years later would resign from AIR.
Right.
And can I read a little bit of that
Sure.
press release that you allowed us to publish into the catalog? Just because I think it would be fascinating for people to hear about, I guess, how her work was being received and interpreted after 10 years of really building a foundation of what her thematic concerns were and what she really wanted to explore in nature. People saw her body, saw the female figure, immediately made connotations with the great goddess or the great mother. And that's, why she, I guess, removed herself from the work and made these genderless forms, right? And so she organized an exhibition there called Dialectics of Isolation, an exhibition of third world women artists in the United States, which she co-curated with Kazuko Miyamoto and Zarina. And there's a portion of the press release, which we've published in the catalog for the exhibition at Vaz Projects. We of the third world in the United States have the same concerns as the people of the unaligned nations. The white population of the United States, diverse, but of basic European stock, exterminated the indigenous civilization and put aside the black as well as the other non-white cultures to create a homogeneous male-dominated culture above the internal divergency. During the mid to late 60s, as women in the United States politicized themselves and came together in the feminist movement, with the purpose to end the domination and exploitation by the white male culture, they failed to remember us. American feminism, as it stands, is basically a white middle class movement.
Right, which is why she didn't consider herself a feminist. Not that she didn't consider herself a feminist, but she didn't consider herself a feminist.
Right.
Because to her it was like, oh, these are all white women and they don't accept me, they don't see me, and I don't belong in this group. But in that time period, feminism was very separated with,
Right. I think we're going to try to jump to some Q&A, but I wanted to just re-mention again that the restoration process began here in Los Angeles when you were living here, and that Ana, in fact, spent some time here in Los Angeles working on a proposal for a sculpture installation at MacArthur Park. And I'm just curious to hear about where that project exists right now.
Well, the project, she did prototypes, and she made them in her studio in Rome when she was exploring, working with objects and she was using wood and gunpowder and the dirt and the mud and the sand and, and all this to create sculptures. And so we have these prototypes for a proposed project that has not been done yet. So maybe someday.
Well, someday, yes, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Raquel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. just a brief, if anybody's interested in seeing more films by Ana, we're going to be screening 5 more films next Sunday, April 6th at MoCA, alongside Super 8s by Derek Jarman and video and filmic work by P. Staff. All of those films kind of explore chromatic manipulation and experimentation across all 3 artists' works, and there will be books for sale, and there will be a chat with Chrissy Isles, curator from the Whitney, who's written about all 3 artists over the past 2 decades. So I promise it'll be very interesting. And I don't know if we have time for Q&A, but 2 or 3 questions? Yeah, I know, I'm totally glared. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, ushers will bring microphones to folks who have questions.
Thanks for the talk and thanks for the very interesting presentation. I have 2 questions, one shorter and one a little bit more elaborate. The first question is, how is Ana regarded in Cuba as an artist and as an exile, and in terms of her connections or disconnections with Cuba? And secondly, I see in a lot of what you've been discussing and in the films themselves, a search for belonging, a search for integration or assimilation, and yet distance. And I wonder if you see that too.
To answer the first question, in Cuba, she's adored. You know, they love her, and she's kind of like the godmother of art, you know, and there's a lot of appropriation and homage and that kind of thing, but it's very beautiful. And yes, of course, I mean, that's you know, the universal theme that people really kind of connect with the work, is that search for home and that search for connection with the earth. And it's obvious. I mean, you can't, you know, deny that theme in her work, and she does talk about that.
I just have a follow-up. Thank you. I was really talking in a less. I was really questioning in a more social way how she connects with Iowa or with New York or with Cuba or Miami, or you said she lived in Rome. This search for some kind of belonging or some kind of integration, having been taken from her own environment involuntarily, and never having had the opportunity to return until much later in her life.
If you'll let me, I feel like she moved away from that very specific kind of attachment to place,
yeah, I
a
don't think-
specific place.
Yeah, I don't think it was about the place as far as Iowa,
Right.
Mexico. It was more the place, the magic and energy of the place. Because, you know, she did speak about how she didn't just do work anywhere. And that's why a lot of times she would go back to a same place, because it's like she was creating an energy there with what she was bringing there. So it wasn't because it was in Iowa. It was just because it was that specific land or whatever. So
I think in general, the idea is that to look for places where the human and non-human can refuse, right? That there is no difference between the human body
Right.
and the earth and the
Right.
landscape. And so it's completely beyond Iowa, New York, Cuba, being Cuban, being a woman, being an aunt, being an art, you know, she's first and foremost an artist, as you said. And so I think it really is about showing people like you and I that it's about connecting and refusing the body and the earth, the human and the non-human, because we are in fact completely connected and imbricated and implicated in one another's fate. There's somebody here, and then is that the last question? There's somebody here. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Sorry, I can't see anything. Uh-huh.
Hi there. Thanks so much for putting this evening together. I just had a question based on kind of Ana's relationship as the performer in her works and also the filmmaker, and if there was any kind of conflict or how she navigated that space of either collaboration or getting help, and if there were any issues that you know of with people who have helped out her work in any way. I can just feel like as a performance artist as well, there's oftentimes the work becomes whoever like press the shutter in certain ways with photo and film, and I'm wondering with her work how she navigated that as a performance artist.
I mean, I think that because the time period, it's like it was an understood thing that if you're the artist, it's kind of like if you're an actor and you're directing your film. It's like you're still directing, but you're in the film. So even though she's in it, she was saying, I want it to be like this, you know. So it's like the person who was pressing the, you know, the button or whatever was not the author, because it was her. It was her idea. It was her, you know, it's her conception, her performative action, and the other person was just facilitating that by helping her. So I mean, no one has ever questioned that. Like, I mean, for the documentary, like I've spoke to like every single person who was around her, and no one even ever brought it up because it was like a known thing. And you know, and in turn, she would help someone else, and they all kind of like helped each other if someone needed that. I think for her, moving away from that was not really about worrying about like who owns what. It was more about wanting to have more control and being able to just take more action when she needed to, and not have to rely on like when somebody was available. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Hello. Thank you thank both of you so much. Such an honor to be here with you and seeing these works in their flesh. I wanted to ask if you could comment on the resemblance of almost a funerary or death kind of presence, absence, and that in kind of juxtaposition with the sort of intense energy you spoke of in her character. And I just feel in all of it this sort of pressing through this lifetime into another. So just, yeah, your comment on
She was, I mean, one of her main themes that she did speak about was about the cycle of life, you know, and so it's like that's why nature is like the best medium, because we see it constantly with nature, how it grows and it dies and it's rebirth. And so that's what she was actually trying to, you know, basically mirror. You know, it's like using nature to show that transformation. And so those kind of images, it's like really speaking to that idea of like life, death, rebirth, you know. And she was also very influenced by like Mexico and like the kind of imagery that was there. I mean, if you look at like these kind of, I mean, that's like, you even look at Frida Kahlo and like how she's influenced by it. It's like, it's all like these, like the skeleton masks and like the flower funeral kind of things. And so, I mean, that was early on where she was like kind of taking these ideas and using them and integrating them, and then other cultures as well, like taking those ideas and bringing. She loved Egyptian art. She loved like all of these kind of different types of art, and you know, was just fascinated by that. But it really is all about the idea of, you know, we are all ephemeral, right? None of us are here forever. It's a known thing. It's like we're all born, we all live, and we all die. And if you believe in it, we're all reborn and do it again and again. So it's, you know, this was her. That's what she was doing with this work.
I think for me also, listening to that question and the question earlier, is that effectively she's engaging with cultures, histories, knowledge that moves beyond binary of male, female, life, death, Cuba, America. It was not of interest to her. Death and rebirth are one. And so that's what you're seeing in the work. And that's what people are confronting in their work also, and why it is also really hard to talk about, because growing up in a Western country, we don't have the vocabulary for speaking that way. And I think that's what we're really exploring at Vaz Projects too with the exhibition, is how these people are moving away from this binary and really entering into perpetual becoming, perpetual hybridization. I mean, how crazy is that, right? And I think that's what I see in Ana's work. And that's why she's really, her work is almost performing as a prototype for what we see as a lineage of queering nature, even though she wasn't queer. You know, she really kind of
set forth, I mean, obviously P and Derek Jarman probably didn't know about Ana, but she really kind of made these breakthrough actions that were
It's also because
earth-shaking,
but
right?
it's really because she didn't like labels and she didn't like the boxes, and so she was just saying, get rid of all of that. So in that sense, yes, it's like don't call me a woman, don't call me a performance artist, don't call me a feminist, like don't call me Cuban, don't call me any of these things. Like I'm me, I'm an artist. Like what's the big deal, you know? So I mean, she was very ahead of her time in that sense, and she didn't ask for it. She just was. Like it was like, you know, this is it. Like I'm me and this is it. So
That's the perfect note to end on. Thank you, Raquel.
I just want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. I know some of you came from all over the place, and it's really means a lot to me. So thank you so much.